24th, 2020. Thank you. I now declare the public hearing open. If anyone desires to express their views regarding the proposed annual action plan, please come forward and be recognized, and your written comments are also welcome. Anybody want to comment on the action plan? Okay, seeing that there are no comments, I now declare the public hearing closed. And we will move on to our commission meeting. And Alyssa, do you want to take roll and evaluate the quorum?
Just start.
All right, we'll start. Commissioner Freeman? Okay. Commissioner Brown?
Here.
Commissioner, Chairperson Heinz Silvis?
I'm here.
Commissioner Diana?
Here.
Commissioner Jones?
Here.
Commissioner Salam?
Here.
And Commissioner White is not here.
So we have a quorum. Thank you. So the first item on our agenda is the minutes of our last meeting, and that was January 7th, 2020. And you had, it was on the portal from the city website, and then Alyssa just passed out written copies of the January 7th minutes. So has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from January 7th? Do I hear a motion for approval?
I move to approve.
Patty, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Is there discussion? Hearing no discussion, I'll ask for approval. All in favor of approval of the minutes of January 7th, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion passes and the minutes are approved. Are there any additions to our agenda for this evening? Okay. Is there any public input for the commission's meeting tonight? Okay. So we are on to presentations, including the staff report.
I'll let Alyssa go first. I don't really have a written report right now.
Okay.
We have our consolidated plan, annual action plan coming up. And in the packets I gave out, we have kind of a list of our timeline for the consolidated plan and the annual action plan. And then we have a list of our public outreach. We are required to have 5 public meetings, or public hearings, I mean. So we have 1 scheduled at Salt and Light, 1 at the Urbana Library. We'll have 1 at CD Commission, and we are working on the other 2.
Right. Yeah, in the past, they would have all meetings in 1 week, the first week of January, which is a terrible time to try to get outreach and input. And so we decided this year that we would try to go where there's currently meetings or people there. So that's why we're going to Salt and Light. We're trying to get on the agenda for the United Way Executive Directors meeting, so we'll hit all of the social service agencies. So that's kind of our focus this year. Plus, we've been working on this since probably July. We had an online survey. We've gone to Township and met with people and taken surveys, and Habitat, and have gotten over 100 responses. So I had passed out this sheet here, which kind of just identifies a summary of the overall goals that the community has said they see are the highest need in Champaign County. So that includes, the highest is infrastructure, lighting, drainage, flooding problems, public parks, art facilities, and that's for both communities. That's not just Urbana. Obviously, homeless is a big issue. There's a need for transitional housing and homeless services, as well as shelter. We don't have a year-round shelter for homeless people in this community. Housing, weatherization, owner-occupied housing rehab, rental assistance, and housing for the homeless or previously incarcerated. And then our public service, what we've heard is mental health, youth, seniors, disabled, and crime prevention. So kind of a big, broad list for a little tiny pot of money. But that's what we've gotten so far. You can talk about the social service funding. Did you bring that up?
We have consolidated social service funding, which our first workshop will be this Thursday at 11 a.m. in the city council chambers. So any agency that wants to apply this year has to attend one of the 2 workshops, and the second workshop will be next Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. And yeah, we're hoping for a smooth process this year. We kind of got everything, all the wrinkles ironed out last year.
Have they set their priorities?
No, that's under new business.
Okay.
And then update from last year's Consolidated Social Service Fund. I put the annual report into your packet today.
And just a sidebar comment, we realized when we were looking at this year's consolidated social service funding, one of the things that we didn't get information on that we would like to gather is leveraging resources. So if we fund an agency, is that helping them get additional funds? Because I think that's an important story to tell. And I know a lot of agencies rely on this because it's a little bit looser than some of the other funding sources. So they can use it as match funds. Anything that's not funded with CDBG can be used as match funds. So that makes it nice for the agencies. So hopefully next year's report, we will have information on, you know, we gave this amount of money, but it leveraged this much more into the community. Is that it?
That's all I have, yeah.
Under new business, amendment to the consolidated plan, I passed that out tonight for everybody to review. And looking at our budget, and, you know, for those of you that weren't here at the beginning, we don't expect a decision to be made at this meeting. It's just information sharing, and we will have another public hearing at your February meeting where we will ask you to vote on the amendment. But HUD changed the way that they do their grant system. So it used to be first in, first out, kind of like our checkbook. You know, the first money in is usually the first money out. Well, they changed it a few years ago, and now it's grant-based accounting. So you may get to the end of 2014, and if you haven't spent all your money, it doesn't roll up. It just stays there. So what this amendment does is kind of reallocates all those little pots of money from 2014 forward so that we can spend that on projects. Because if we don't do this, they get sent back to HUD, and we don't want that to happen. So as you look at the amendment that I passed out, it talks about, let me find my copy here. You'll see it starts with a very small amount of money, like the 14-15. We had $11,267 left, so we amended the budget that we didn't spend all of it on, and that difference is what that is. And when you get to the very end, that total pot of money is $250,000. So it makes a big difference when you add up all of the little ones. And what we've decided to allocate it to, or we're recommending that it get allocated to, is our neighborhood revitalization line item, which is our funds that we use to support neighborhood revitalization activities, including capital improvement projects, code enforcement, blight abatement, those type of things. There's a street lighting project that has been on hold for several years because there hasn't been enough funding available to do it. And it is in one of our low mod census tracts, and so that's what we're recommending that these funds be used for, is to install lighting on Kent Street. So as you guys, look this over, we'll vote on it in February, but if you have any questions, please feel free to call Alyssa and I. And I also included a memo just for your review as you look it over. The other thing I guess I added, or I've shared with you, as we go into this 5-year consolidated planning process, we're looking at all of our policies so that as we amend, or we go into the next 5 years, everything has been reviewed and updated at that same time. And one of the things that we are updating is this citizen participation plan. So I would ask that you just kind of review it. We'll vote on it in February. Very little changes were made, but one of the things that we did was change the time of this meeting because it went from 7 to 6. And then we also, the old one required us to do 5 public hearings, and we felt like it was more important to do public input meetings. So we go to those people that we know are having meetings, or churches. We've been to the Interfaith Alliance groups, and we actually get input from people who are already meeting on something else. And so rather than have a formal hearing at that point, we'll just gather input that way. And then we'll have 2 formal hearings, one at this group and then one at council. Yeah. And if you want the old one, I can send it to you by email, but it's not a lot of changes. But it kind of guides us in how we do our public process.
It sounds like such a good idea to change the way you're gathering input. I wonder if one of the things that you should note is the number of, I don't know how you would figure this, but maybe the number of people who provided input all these different ways versus what happened last year. Because I
Yeah.
think you'll see that's, I mean, for anybody who questions why the change, that would be the justification for doing it differently.
Right. So far, we've had, and we aren't done with our public process, neither is Champaign. We've had over 100 people respond, and last year we had 3. So it's a big difference. Plus, you know, it's kind of a waste of staff time to go sit at a meeting, 7 o'clock on a Monday night at Martin Luther King School and wait for somebody to come, and then they don't come. So I think it's just a better use of our time. And the communities, we can tag onto those existing meetings.
And the chart I gave out with our public outreach so far, it says, there'll be this many people in attendance, or we receive this many surveys, so it's a little bit more tracked.
Any other, are you guys finished with the staff report?
Just one comment. I would suggest you talk with it's called the Minister Alliance of Springfield, of Champaign and vicinity. As a different group than an interfaith group.
It is. Can you get me a contact, and we'll try to get on their meeting agenda?
They meet every first Saturday at 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So just kind of okay.
So they have one coming up. Okay. Okay. Yeah, you can give me the contact afterwards, and I'll see if I can get on their agenda. That'd be great.
Just an informational question, if you happen to know. You were mentioning possibly utilizing some of those funds for a lighting project on Kinch. How long has that project been? I know it's been around for a while. How long has that been on hold?
A long time. I don't want to misstate it, but at least 5 or 6 years, and maybe
That's what I
longer.
was
It's been
thinking.
around a long time. Because I think at one time, CDBG dollars were budgeted towards it, but for whatever reasons, it didn't happen. So right now, Public Works is doing outreach and having a third party kind of do the design, and will help with the implementation because they're kind of short-staffed right now too. And all of those are eligible costs, so it at least help the project move forward.
Right, that was, I know we've had, and I don't know if you have off the top of your head an idea either, we've had quite a few lighting projects done in
That's
town
good.
in the past 5 or 6 years. And so I would just note, this is something we used to battle on this commission 20-some years ago, long before you were here. Especially with a project like that, that has previously had CDBG funds tagged for it and was never done. So one question would be where those CDBG funds went instead of that project. And that the idea of these funds, as I understand it, were and still are, to assist in blighted areas, not to do the projects in those areas that a city would normally do in a regular rotation for the rest of the city. So it concerns me somewhat. We used to do a lot of this too, where we would be doing projects that should have been done years ago on a city budget, and we were doing them with CDBG, and now this particular one that we earmarked some funds for before, and they obviously went somewhere else.
Yeah, from what I saw in the budgets, and I just looked back to 2014, there was $10,000 allocated, which would not have gone
Obviously not, but.
very far. And there may
Yeah.
have been some before that. I don't know. I went back to 2014 and looked. I can tell you, it's a badly needed project. It's in a low-income neighborhood. With the city's resources, it feels to me like a good use of our funds.
It does, but this is what I was always said 20 years ago, too.
Right.
Meanwhile, all the other good projects in the city had been done.
Right.
And these were bailed out with funds that were really supposed to be advancing those communities, not merely catching them up to where the rest of the city already was.
Right. Yeah, there's 2 projects being done in our targeted neighborhoods this summer, and this is one of them, the lighting project. And then in the King Park neighborhood, they are doing sidewalk repairs and, I want to say ramps, but you know, the sidewalks, instead of having the curbs, they're
The
modifying them, which is
accessible, yeah.
desperately needed. There's a lot of seniors over there. So I'm tickled about that we're going to see some of these efforts move forward.
Just an ongoing question.
Yep,
So.
absolutely.
Any other questions about the staff report, which I think also included, we started in on some new business with the amendment to the consolidated plan, right?
Yep.
And was there any unfinished business? We kind of skipped over that. No, no unfinished business, good. Okay, so are we finished with the discussion about the amendment? Okay.
I am, yeah.
And then we wanted to talk about setting priorities for the Consolidated Social Service Grant, Fund grant.
In the past, I think we've picked, because this will be for the CDBG part that we fund, and you guys will usually pick one priority for that. And I believe we did education this past year, so Habitat was awarded for their housing counseling.
So are we, do we build off that priority, or how would we make those? How did we do that? How did we come up with education?
So normally, the key service areas have been healthcare, family support or special needs, seniors, food security, children and youth, education, employment, housing or homelessness, and racial equity and immigration. They're based off of, I think they've been approved in council in the past. I think that's where they came up with originally. And then we tried to pick the target area, or like key areas that'll serve low income the most. But if you guys had any other suggestions beyond that list, if there's something on there that you think we should be targeting.
And how much money
This-
are we talking about here?
That's what I was going to
Yeah,
say,
that's-
$5,000. The
Yeah,
CDBG
that's
budget is
$5,000.
$5,000. So it doesn't make a huge impact, but it is a pot of money that you guys have input on.
And one of the things, I remember this discussion in previous years, one of the things that we did try to do was have a target that allowed for some flexibility in funding, so that we would choose something that would give us the option to fund a good project. So we also made it broad, like education is pretty broad. So that's another strategy that we've used in the past to give ourselves and staff more choices among what's presented that would fit in under that category. So is there an assessment or some kind of feedback that we got about education as the choice we made? Did that work well?
They do community education for free, and they're the only ones that offer that in Champaign County. And it's not just to people who are buying a Habitat home. It's open to anybody. So they do a pre-purchase home session that's 5 classes, and then they do 3 classes that are post-purchase. They do a couple of classes that are just financial education and coaching, and as, you know, in particular with the new FICO score changing, I think it's important everybody understand how that's going to impact them. They offer free credit reports and teach people how to read them. And then they also partner with the local banks, and every other month they have a meeting where the banks talk about what services they have and the terminology, because you know, they speak their own language, you know, so, you know, what does DTI mean, and, you know, what is a closing disclosure, and when do you need these things? And so they kind of do an education class with the lenders as well. The lenders aren't, they don't promote their products, they talk about things in general. So it's a pretty good broad course that serves the target level that we have to do. With CDBG, there's a few restrictions that the other funds aren't tied to. So I think our total pot this year, is it 100 or 200,000?
I think so.
I think, yeah, the city puts in 75,000, CDBG puts in 5, and then township puts in money. And so total, we look at that. And that's the group that we sent the note out if anybody was interested in attending those meetings. Between now and the middle of April, we'll have several meetings looking at the application, talking about them. We're offering technical assistance again, just like we did last time. So it can be a little time consuming, but we also wanted to give an opportunity to anyone. You're welcome to sit on it if you'd like.
I have a couple questions. Of the list that you turned in, that is the overall goals list?
This list here?
Yes. What were the,
No, this is what has been identified by the community, those over
Yeah.
100 people,
Oh, yeah.
of what they show are kind of the highest goals. It's not anything the city has set yet. We're just sharing that public input.
I'm good, yeah, that's
Okay.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, my question is, what are the percentages of this information that came in were the highest responses?
They're outlined here in the order, but I don't have those percentages because the Champaign staff helped correlate
Oh,
that.
okay. 'Cause
But infrastructure was the highest, then homeless, then housing, then public services in that order. But I don't know if one got 50% and one got 3%. I don't know that. I can share that at the next meeting if we can get that information.
Because that might help us to refine, because you have all this public input, and if we know what the public really wants to address, this might be a good way for us to focus. Because we heard them and we can speak volumes.
Right, so in this category that we sent, the CDBG funds that we're talking about, I would look at the public service priorities that we've heard from so far. So mental health, youth, seniors, disabled, that's kind of the areas that the public has said they feel is important, and that's where these funds would be allocated towards.
If I would, the second question is, because we're looking specifically in Urbana, and because the past 14 months we've had a real high uptick with youth and children with crime, I would look somewhat in that area to try to say, okay, we want to address this and want to support those things that are trying to address that. That makes sense.
Yep, it sure does.
We don't vote on it tonight, do we?
We would like your feedback, but we
Okay.
won't make the final decision on what pot of money feeds where, so you can wait till the February meeting if you want to give us that feedback then. Because applications will be due right after this meeting, right?
They'll be due on the 28th.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they'll have about 5 weeks to complete the application process. And then we'll be making our funding decisions and recommendations to council in the end of March.
Okay. So the 5,000, decision for the 5,000 doesn't have to be voted on today, it has to be.
No, what we ask is for you to tell us what priority, and you, and again, you don't have to tell us that today. You can
I got you.
talk about it at the next meeting. But then as we make those funding decisions,
Kind of guide you guys. Okay.
and one of the things the group looked at last year was because these are all Urbana dollars, but our social service programs cross Wright Street. You know, it's not that only homeless people live here. They're everywhere, and same with our troubled youth. You know, they're throughout the community. We were trying to tie ways to make these funds serve as many Urbana residents as possible. So an example of one of the things that we've implemented with our seniors, piecemeal programs, we will reimburse for Urbana residents only that they serve, because again, it's Urbana tax dollars. But homeless programs, we'll serve however we can, you know. So there's a variety of things that we may be able to do, but that's how we'll do that. You know, Urbana Neighborhood Connections, that's the only youth center in Urbana, and it truly serves only Urbana people. But now Don Moyer Boys and Girls Club will go there and pick up kids and take to their center. So one of the applications last year, we gave them money and reimbursed them for Urbana youth that were served. So, you know, trying to think of that ways to make these small pots of monies really have that impact.
Do we have community partners that partner to match, like a matching grant?
There is, and I can share this at the next meeting. I shared it at council. There's a funders group, and in this community, and the last updated sheet I have is from 2017, over $600,000 went out between the Mental Health Board, the Community Foundation, City of Urbana, City of Champaign, the townships. So there's a large pot of money that goes out to the community. And some of these agencies get funded from more than one because, you know, obviously our 5,000 isn't going to make a big difference in a youth issue or any of these issues, but if they can use that to leverage other funds, then maybe that can make a difference. So that's what I spoke to earlier. We'd like to see how this can leverage other money and make that bigger impact.
So for the priority, you're looking for a general target. So it would be a broad term like youth, youth services, education, seniors, housing, something on that kind of scale of description.
Right, and keep in
Okay.
mind that with, one of the challenges we have with our social service agencies is they don't collect the data that we need in order to report back to HUD. And so that's another reason why when education was a focus last year, Habitat was an easy choice because they already collect that data for HUD. But, you know, especially our homeless services agencies, and the youth, they don't collect income data or that type of information that we have to report on. So we kind of challenge those people to other pots of money where there's not that type of reporting.
Okay, it's good to know.
Can I say, this is a crazy, if we're giving funds, do they actually give us a report back what they did with the funds? And do they give us a census report?
It's given as a reimbursement, so they have to give us, you know, all the proof of their expenditures, and then we have a reporting form, which I'm going to update. I hear it's a little confusing. So I'm gonna update that, but they do give us a reporting form, and that way we can really see, you know, where our impact is, and I can give you reports that have quantified numbers. So I'd say this year's is a little bit better than last year's annual report in terms of being able to say, you know, we can serve this many people, which I don't think is finally in this report because we're still ongoing.
Sure.
But you can at least see how much money we've allocated. So yeah, we do have to have proof of everything.
Right, because I would want to know what is the dollar amount impacting what clientele, what, you know,
And
what
that's what our reporting form does ask, is their income, you know, male,
family
female.
size, all that kind of stuff, okay.
Mhm.
Any other questions around the setting the funding priorities? Do we want to wait until our February meeting to make that decision? Yes, I see heads nodding. Okay, so we'll wait until February to make that decision, but thank you. It's good to have that introduction and background. We can think about it for a while.
Right, and if you look at, you know, page 11 of the report, it shows who applied for funding. We had over 800,000 dollars in request, and we funded 215,000. So there's just a huge demand in this community. And these funds, I feel like are a little more secure than like the state of Illinois funds, because if there's a budget impact, and that happened a few years ago, that really hurt our agencies, and we don't want that to happen again. So thankfully, the fiscal cycle of the federal year, we are lagging, so if they decide to shut down in December like they did a year ago, it doesn't impact us because we're a year behind, so that's helpful.
Okay, is there anything else on our agenda? We've come to the end of our agenda, so if there are any more comments on any of these agenda items? Nope. Then I declare a meeting adjourned. Thank you.